All right, welcome back to another very special episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the sometimes very hot city of Angels, right here, of course, in Southern California, where today I have a guest that I've been working on for quite some time, the one and only, and I'm going to say this, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, astrophysicist, scientist, Mr. or Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Dr. Tyson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, and please call me Neil.
Neil,
Definitely.
thank you so much. And by the way, I respond to John too, so you don't have to throw in my lawyerly Dr. J. You know what I mean?
Well, Dr. J is kind of cool. That's kind of cool.
Well, I took it away from the basketball player because I actually have a doctorate. He didn't. Now, you have a new book, and everyone here is going to know about it. We're going to talk about the title and what's in it, and a few questions about that. Everybody out here, because we only have a limited time, if you wait till the second half and you have super chat questions, I will put you to the front of the line. If they're relevant, I will ask it. So let me first begin. I'm not even going to bother mentioning flat earthers because I can't stand them. And you've done a mic drop moment where you just, I enjoyed that so much because, for them to say there's no such thing as gravity and all this nonsense really, really, ties me in the knot. How does someone like you take something like that? I mean, is it just...
Yeah, I don't, as an educator, educators, if they're good educators, they're not hitting people over the head for thinking incorrectly about something that is objectively true. What you really want to do is probe why they think that way and what led to that. And I've taken a second look back at the K through 12 curriculum for science, and it's pretty clear that science is taught as just some satchel of facts, and then you're done and you move on. You memorize the bold-faced words in the chapters of the textbook, and you take the exam, and nowhere in there are you trained about what science is and how and why it works, and how it is that science is exquisitely tuned to establish objective truths in the world. Those methods and tools were not always there. They're hard-earned over relatively recent centuries. And so when someone says Earth is flat, because they're a skeptic of anyone who says it's round, it means they don't even use the word skeptic correctly. A skeptic is, you'll come in the door saying, I'm not sure about that, but then you have to know how to evaluate evidence and how to weigh evidence. And this is something that's not really trained in the schools. So when I see a flat earther, if they don't harm themselves thinking that, okay. But we have to make sure they don't become head of NASA. Okay.
No, I definitely.
In a free country, then go ahead and think Earth is flat. It's not going to bother me. It really won't.
Now, in the last several years, the Navy has released 3 different videos, one the Tic Tac, one the Gimbal, and one the Go Fast. It very well could be advanced human, technology, but some of the properties these exhibit seem to be like the ability to create gravity. And another scientist, I believe he's also an astrophysicist, he helped with the moon, the rockets in Alabama that first took us to the moon, but he wasn't, working back then, but he's still working in rocketry. And
that'd be Space City, Huntsville, Alabama. Space
City.
Exactly.
Huntsville,
shout out
exactly.
To them.
And so when he was first viewing the footage of the Tic Tac, and he saw, what he thought was a camera artifact, and he talked about, he was definitely more of a skeptic this time, which every scientist needs to be a skeptic, right?
But you have to know when you find convincing evidence,
true,
that your original doubting can convert to confidence in what it is you think you have measured. And so there's an arc from beginning to the end of that where you're done and then you move on to the next problem.
Well, after he watched it a second time, and the first time he was saying it could be, an advanced fighter, we can yaw, we can roll, we can do all sorts of stuff. But once he realized that the distortion that seemed to be around one of those 3 craft, I think it was the Tic Tac, he says, I think we're witnessing an Alcubierre warp drive.
Alcubierre.
Alcubierre warp drive. And I was hoping you could explain that to everybody out there. And do you think it's possible that some of these technologies are using gravity to essentially skip from dimension to dimension, from one point to another, as opposed to traveling in a straight line?
Yeah, there's from my read of what has been presented,
Hmm.
for what the Navy pilots saw on monochromatic video from their fighter jets
Hmm.
in restricted airspace, um, we can. The first comment here is, that's interesting. I don't know what that is. That's
Yes.
really what you should be. You start there, okay? Just start there, because it defies anything anybody's seen before. So it's a mystery, and it's okay to live with a mystery. There's
That's right.
nothing wrong. Everything that's a mystery doesn't have an instant explanation. They
That's right.
require further research. They require replication. They require new ways of looking at the same thing so that you get other angles, literal angles for sure, but definitely
Hmm.
other intellectual angles on what the problem, the challenge, the object, the phenomenon might be.
Hmm.
So if you want to declare that this is alien technology we're observing, if you assert that, then have at it. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're going to declare that about it, then try to explain it with all kinds of physics defying feats achieved by visiting aliens. Go right ahead. It would make a really fun science fiction story to explore everything, all the branches of physics being violated by what's viewed in the monochromatic video of the Navy pilots in restricted airspace. So an Alcubierre drive
Hmm.
is, it actually has authentic physics behind it. I forgot when it was published, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
Uh,
fairly recently, from what I
yeah,
saw.
basically recently,
Yeah.
and it is an authentic means by which you can travel faster than light.
Yes.
And it comes closest to how the Star Trek warp drives worked, which is something I had not fully understood when I
Hmm.
first watched it, because I'm old enough to have seen it in first run. Later analysis of what's going on is the way this works is you take the space in front of you
Hmm.
and then you compress it, and then you sort of surf that, and then on the backside you expand it again to sort of the normal space-time density, if you will.
Hmm.
And so you're not actually moving through space faster than light. Space is being compressed in front of you, but you need a mechanism to make that happen. The Alcubierre drive is not an actual physical engineering marvel or invention. It is a physics idea, which,
Hmm.
if you had the capacity to shrink space-time in front of you and stretch it behind you, you would then travel effectively faster than light. And so that's what an Alcubierre drive is. I suspect, I don't know the full testimony or his full analysis, but what I suspect, he sees it move in ways that are either that would be faster than light, given assumptions he's making about the object. And if you have an Alcubierre drive, you could move faster than light. So
And for the longest time, I mean, for decades, we've been hearing that there's no way to travel past a certain speed in space, for us to even get to Alpha Centauri. I mean, what is it going to
no,
take?
no,
What,
no,
30, 40?
no. There's no way to do it unless we have the power to manipulate
Yes.
the fabric of
Gravity,
space-time. That's we've
which
known that
for,
since 1916. So
correct.
don't say there's no way. No, there are ways. We just
Mhm.
don't know how to do it. We can't do
Yes.
it. So we're stuck with regular rocket engines. That's all.
Correct. And those rocket engines are going in a straight line, and clearly they're not being the most efficient where they could travel faster than the speed of light. And I'm glad you mentioned going back as early as 1916,
But by the way,
because
just a quick, if you don't warp space time in some way, the way we do every day in science fiction, you are
Mhm,
not accelerating faster than the speed of light. You will always
yes,
be less than the speed of light, no matter what. You can't say, let me just get a bigger rocket engine and zoom past the speed of light as though it's the sound barrier. All right. They're fundamentally different limits
yes.
on what engineering can and will accomplish.
And the speed of light, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't 186,000 and so many feet per second or miles per second?
Miles per second, 186,282,
Yeah.
if you're keeping records,
Yeah.
282 miles per second.
That's
Yes, and so
insane. Yeah.
so to put that in context, the moon is far enough away, so it takes about just a little under 1.5 seconds for light to reach the
And
moon.
that's about 220 miles away, right? Or yeah,
240,000
200.
miles away. It varies because it's got an oval orbit
Yeah.
around us.
So
And
literally just a little over a second, like you
yeah,
said,
correct.
under 1.5 seconds. That's
But watch,
phenomenal.
as objects get farther and farther away from us,
Mhm.
the light travel time gets ever more, gets ever longer. So the
Yes.
sun, the light travel time is 500 seconds, right?
Gotcha.
8 minutes and 20 seconds. So you go to the planets. So we are now controlling and interacting with an SUV-sized rover on the surface of Mars. And depending on where we are in orbit relative to Mars, the time delay between commands can be anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour and a half. I'd have to do the math on that to get the precise differences, but Mars could be on the other side of the sun from us. Okay, so and Mars is farther away from the sun than we are. So you just start adding all this up. You get anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes up to, I think it's more like a half hour. I have to run the math on it. Anyhow, the point is, the farther away the object is, the farther back in time you are observing. The farther back in time is the light that you are seeing from it. And so some of these objects, the light is just a ghost of what was once there. There's certain stars that exploded and died long ago.
But we're not just now seeing them, right? Because the light took that long to get here.
Correct. And they've been long dead, but we're now seeing them. And this is, we're living in this reality. And so generally, if you hear an astrophysicist speak of a star that has just died, they'll say, oh, it exploded 3 months ago on this date. But we're not back calculating when the star, from where the star is in space. All of our vocabulary and in our communication is just, when was it observed from Earth? If you want to go do the calculation, you can, but just to keep it simple, we say this star exploded on this date.
Real quick, now I was going to ask a question about gravity, but we'll come back to that. I think now is a good time to bring Blake Cousins in. Blake, you met Dr. Tyson. Go ahead and ask your first question, and then I'll get the follow-up and yours follow-up after.
Absolutely. That. Thanks, Dr. J, for having us on, and good to see you, Neil.
Yeah, hi, Blake. Hi, Blake. So you're still at it, making all those documentaries. I'm very impressed.
Yeah, appreciate it. You should be in our next documentary. We're asking these big questions. Would love to get your thoughts. Maybe we could actually use this clip in a documentary. You never know. It's kind of interesting because your colleague, right, Michio Kaku, recently was on Joe Rogan, and he is stating something to the effect that we have undeniable evidence that there's something out there that's defying the laws of physics due to these Navy videos. You were talking about it earlier, these UAP videos. Do you see anything in those videos that defy the laws of physics or seemingly defy the laws of physics, like your correspondent or colleague Michio Kaku? Do you agree with his statement that these videos prove undeniable evidence?
So if you look back in the history of physics and the history of discoveries that at the time seemed to not make sense in any context of the known laws of physics, upon further examination of phenomenon, objects, ideas, what we persistently find is that it has never been magic. Okay, so what is magic? Magic, according to Arthur C. Clarke, is a sufficiently advanced technology. It would be then indistinguishable from magic. So when I say magic, I mean super advanced technology. So we look around the universe, we look at objects, phenomenon, we look at things. So I don't know what that is. Why is it doing that? And we investigate it. Occasionally, a new law of physics gets discovered. That's how quantum physics emerged now a century ago. We're in the decade, the century anniversary decade of the discovery of quantum physics in the 1920s. Atoms and molecules were behaving they were misbehaving in all manner of ways. It's like, what is this? Who ordered that? Okay, a whole new understanding of physics had to emerge. Okay, and it was called quantum physics. So it's not as though we're not capable of arriving at new physics understandings of things we didn't previously understand. What I just want to impress upon you is that if there's something that is completely bonkers, all right, more often than not, it is either an error in the observation, in the measurement, in the thing, and it reduces to simple physics at the end of the day. That happens so often that it would be unreasonable to expect the large body of physicists to say, yeah, let's jump all over this. It's aliens and they got new technology and they got things, nothing we understand, and it's all amazing. That's not their first posture. You have to recognize that. And it's because of the history of this. Anytime something happens that defies what people expect the laws of physics to do, it doesn't turn out to be actual magic beyond anything we've ever seen. So
do we see any magic in these videos? Do you see any magic or anything that is extraordinary in these videos that came out?
Yeah, I would say I can't explain them. But that's not the same thing. No, I'm perfectly happy saying I don't know what I'm looking at. That's different from saying I don't know what I'm looking at. Therefore, it's visiting aliens from outer space with special technologies that are beyond what we understand. Those are two completely different approaches to those data. And so, and then when you make the assumption that it's aliens with technology, then it takes you in a very interesting path, which I don't have a problem with. But you can't expect the larger physics community to jump on board with it, because the history of that is one where that is not the case. That we learn there is an artifact in the data mechanism of the video device. Or here's something that's more believable to me than we're being visited by aliens from another planet. Notice these are only happening in restricted airspace. So I'm just making this up. Maybe the Navy intentionally put artifacts in their video just to see how the pilots react and what they would report it as. And we have psychologists and other experts taking note on how did they perform under these situations. That's easier for me to believe, because notice it only happened in restricted airspace. Because, by the way, if that stuff happened outside of restricted airspace, it would mean passenger liners would see it. It would show up on their radar. It would show up on FAA's radar. It would people would be able to photograph it with the high resolution smart cameras, and none of that happens. Okay, we don't see actual flying saucers or landing with aliens coming out, walking towards you. That would go viral instantly. Oh my God.
We got a lot of flying saucer videos, but yeah, we get you. You know, it's interesting. And I agree with you 100% that I think that what's going on with these encounters are most likely some kind of exercise or a test on our own best of the best.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's most. I'm going to say that's more plausible to me. That's all I want to say. Yeah, than that absolutely. We're being observed by visiting aliens from outer space.
And that's what I was going to follow up with, Blake. Of course, at first, you know, these videos come out. Everyone says, "Hey, look, this is proof of extraterrestrials visiting us." But the more I come to think about it, I tend to believe both of you that this may very well be all three of those videos were our craft. That is our new special form of fighter, or something that we're clearly testing. And like you said, Dr. Tyson,
or just an artifact they put in digitally into the data device. Okay, yes, these are computers, so you can put something in there. It wouldn't have to be an actual object doing that. It would just have to be something they tossed in there. That's trivial to do.
Dr. Blake, I'll give you the final question for this before I go back to Dr. Tyson.
Oh, by the way, just Blake, you mentioned you have plenty of video of flying saucers. That's great. Okay. Keep doing that.
We don't know what they are. We're not saying they're little green men. We're just
okay. So fine. So you have these things. We don't know what they are. It's suspicious, and it's definitely not us, not our stuff. So,
well, we're not saying that either. We don't know what they are. We're trying to find out.
They could be secrets, of course. Very good. And very correct in your very sensible in your approach to that. I would just say it would be really good if you can get one to land and have the aliens come out. That just and then then you'd be
that's
rich and
ultimate
famous.
goal.
You'd be more rich and more famous overnight than you already are.
That's the only proof we need if that happens, and it hasn't, right?
I haven't seen it. I don't.
Yeah.
What's your
Cat videos go viral. Much less goes viral. All right, this would be world changing.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah, we're still waiting for the smoking gun, but we do have tens of thousands of compelling videos from the public that are pretty much unexplained at the moment. Again, mundane, possibly something otherworldly, who knows, or something maybe ours. My question to you is, I know you're not a government official, but if you were advised, hypothetically, they would come to you from the government and ask for your advice as far as it's a double question here. If they did have evidence of ET visitation, perhaps the 1947 Roswell recovery, and they have this body and they have the craft, would they release that to the public? And let's just say if the government had technology that seemingly looks like ET, extraordinary meta propulsion, would they release that to the public?
So I'm going to answer that in a way you might not expect. Everything I know about the government tells me they are sufficiently inept at keeping a secret that I have no expectation that they're stockpiling or hiding something as amazing as aliens in any location on Earth. The US government is not that competent. Okay, period. Anyone who's ever worked for them in any capacity knows that. First. Second, they don't get
the CIA is not competent.
No.
They don't. At keeping a secret? At keeping a secret? Oh my gosh. If you're the janitor in a place where they stockpile aliens, you could just take a picture of it, upload it to the internet. You'll lose your job, but you would have delivered the photo of the century. Okay? Secrets. Oh my gosh. Who was it? Was it Ben Franklin that said three people can keep a secret, but only if two of them are dead? Okay.
Yes, that's who
they did a pretty good job with the Manhattan Project, though. You got to admit, there's a lot of people,
but it was also very
no. The point with the Manhattan, the reason why the Manhattan Project worked was it was very distributed, right? They're isolating the uranium and the Pacific Northwest,
the whole thing,
doing the physics over here, so no one person could see what was going on. If you got aliens, that's not a distributed thing. That's like all in and in place. So what's my point? So the government is not as competent as you were giving them credit for being. And they don't have the best people. They don't have the smartest people. The smartest people are independent in companies making $1 zillion, not on a government salary. So
that's what I was going to mention. Private corporation, but contracted to the government.
Yes, that.
So when that
they
comes
can do
involved,
both things. Yes.
How far advanced do you think a private corporation in aerospace or propulsion is that's hidden from the public? How many years are they advanced at this moment? Because when they released the stealth bomber, I think it's 40 years later. Are we still 40 years behind, or since technology has been ramping up so much, how far are they ahead?
Yeah.
That's
so
not
what tends to happen when things are classified is rarely ever is it some completely new thing that blows everybody's mind. Typically, what's classified is the exact specs that the thing that is released is capable of. And so they release something that's less than that, typically. And the enemy sees these numbers, and they don't know what the actual numbers are. So they don't know what to actually design against in sort of anti-tank warfare sense, right? Or an arms race. They don't know quite what to measure it against. And so in so doing, the secrets are not so much, here's a thing nobody's ever dreamt of or thought of. The secrets tend to be what the capability of what is already known to exist would actually give us.
The last time I had Dr. Kaku on, I was shocked because that was the first time he suggested that the Tic Tac, Go Fast, and Gimbal were possibly extraterrestrial drones. And I know he's been very reserved. For him to have said that, I was like, wow, okay, maybe he's starting to see more and know more that I don't already know. Now, let me go back to Einstein, right? We talked about, he talked, I guess you could say he's the father of quantum physics, right?
Not really. No, that would be Planck. Einstein contributed mightily to quantum physics. Einstein's the father of relativity.
And Einstein theorized that a black hole exists, but it wasn't until recently in the last few years that we actually were able to see one photographically. I mean, I don't know how many people doubted that they exist, but I think it was such a major thing when we finally got to see one. How did you
It's a
feel when
great,
you
inquiry. So let me just say, so Einstein himself was in denial of black holes. His
Mhm.
own theories of the universe, in their limit, give you black holes, and he thought maybe there'd be something in nature that would prevent such an absolute gravitational collapse. So we needed people to come after him to then recognize that black holes can exist, probably exist, and do exist. And so this, by the way, in science, we don't require photos
Mhm.
when we have, as for the evidence that something exists. It's helpful
Yes.
and it's easy to explain in the news, but we allow things to exist depending on what kinds of other evidence is available to us. So we've seen in the center of our galaxy stars zipping around
Mhm.
an empty place in the galactic center, and we say, okay, either it's just magic, all right,
Yeah.
there's a magic slingshot there, or there's a dense object that is not giving us light. We think it's a black hole. And by the way, this is happening in every galaxy we look at. Maybe every galaxy has a black hole. Black hole has been
Mhm.
in our vocabulary since the 1970s. And
Yes.
so we didn't need a photo as for evidence of it to convince us that there were black holes out there. We had plenty of other circumstantial evidence where everything we know about black holes would explain what we saw, even
Mhm.
without the photo itself.
What is your take on SpaceX? Do you think that okay, they have reusable rockets, right? Which is great because they've been able to take the cost of going to the moon, going to low Earth orbit and beyond, such as Mars, much, much more efficient, right? Do you think that any astronaut has ever encountered something in space that they don't wish to talk about here on the ground, maybe for national security reasons? And the reason I brought up SpaceX too is, do you think someone such as him running a space program, or at least contributing to NASA by building these rockets and training some astronauts, do you think if there's any crazy stuff going on with ETs or potential ETs or UAPs, do you think someone like him would have been briefed?
So a couple of things. Yes, I mean he does things for the government, and I don't remember whether he launches classified satellites. I just don't remember. I don't see
Yeah,
why he wouldn't if he can
he
do it
does
cheaply.
both. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
classified satellites and
sure.
then
That makes sense. I
non-classified
just didn't. I
astronauts.
just hadn't confirmed that. So sure, he would be inside the closed room for
Hmm.
classified briefings. I have no doubt about that. I will say that yeah, you're correct. By reusing the rockets, he can reduce the cost of access to space. Very important engineering frontier that he is conquering. Basically, you still have to get it even cheaper than he's doing it for it to become a regular tourist destination. Or am I going
Hmm.
to go to Disney World? Or am I going to go into orbit? You know, if you want it on that level, so it commoditizes space tourism, the price has to become much lower than it currently is. Um, you, as for what astronauts may have seen or experienced, keep in mind astronauts are human beings with
Hmm.
a sensory system that is biologically limited. So if you want to put an astronaut up and quiz them on what they saw and use that as the measure of what's up there, but meanwhile we have thousands of telescopes with much better accuracy of data taking than
Hmm.
your own human eye, ear, brain data taking system. We're looking up at
Yes.
the universe all the time. We can see the edge of the universe. We don't have to send
Yes.
up an astronaut to say, okay, tell us what you see. All right. Our telescopes do better than that. And from our telescopes, no, we do not see what you're asking me, whether astronauts have seen it. That being said, Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14,
Yes,
he,
great friend
he-
of mine, by the way. I interviewed him more times in the last 2 years before his death than anyone else did. Sadly, I never released the final interview with him because I recorded it Wednesday. He passed away Friday.
oh wow, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So So he was he co-founder of the Noetic Institute?
Yeah, he founded it. Yeah, I know he
yeah.
had other people running it, but yeah, that was his
Thank you for that
big thing.
clarification.
Yeah,
Right.
of course.
So he had basically a spiritual experience on his way back from the moon, and he told me about it, and I was fascinated by his description. So the way it worked is, you come back from the moon in the command module, okay, and that's where your 3 astronauts. It's Apollo, and it's got the 3 astronauts. On his way back from the moon, the command module was rotating in such a way that his view out the window was in the plane of the solar system rather than out of the plane of the solar system. So if you're in the plane of the solar system, what it means is the sun, the moon, Earth, and all the planets are in view. And so there they are. You're in the plane of the solar system, and he's rotating in the plane. So every rotation of his capsule, he sees the sun, Earth, and moon, and the rest of the planets. And this happens his entire 3-day trip back to Earth.
Yes.
And so he's just watching this go by rhythmically. And this moved him on a spiritual level. And he wondered, is there a consciousness, a state of consciousness that's deeper than anything we have access to here on Earth, just doing normal earthly things? And might space either, I don't want to speak for him, but this was my understanding of where he was coming from, that might space somehow unlock an extra sense of awareness about the machinery and operations and the spiritual forces of the universe. And that got him thinking. Throughout history, there are all these examples of people who are enlightened in ways that other people aren't. There are shamans in villages, even some of the great Bible characters like Jesus or Muhammad. You people who others around them noticed that they were completely different.
Yes.
Were they accessing some state of mind or consciousness that he thinks he might have touched or got touched by on his route back? So that's interesting. Okay. A telescope is not going to be able to do that. And so.
I was just going to say, by him literally traveling to the moon, and particularly, as you mentioned, on his way back, having this, I don't know how I want to call it, because it's not a meltdown. It was an epiphany about consciousness. And literally, he devoted the rest of his life to unlocking consciousness. And obviously that begs
going
the
into
question.
Space can change you. By the way, in my book, the book opens with a quote from Edgar Mitchell. Okay, I memorized it. If you allow me to recite it.
Oh no, please do.
Okay. You develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck, drag him 250,000 miles out, and say, "Look at that, you son of a bitch."
You know what?
That's quoted in Time magazine, shortly after he returned from the moon.
I honestly would have never known, Edgar to speak that way, but I'm not surprised. Such a great gentleman, and it's sad that we lost him. Now, I'm going to go back to the UAPs for a quick second. Do you think?
By the way, I'm angry with the government for not still calling them UFOs. It's almost as though they wanted to rebrand it.
And you know what? My opinion is you're right. They called them flying saucers, then UFOs, then they called them UAPs instead of UFOs. You know what?
You can't call it flying saucers if you don't know it's a saucer. It's unidentified, so you can't call it a saucer. So it's unidentified. We know that. Okay. So, but to rebrand it, I was disappointed. I thought they should have.
And I heard, because I have a lot of political connections, that after Hillary went on Jimmy Kimmel and said, we don't call them UFOs anymore, we call them UAPs. There's a new term that is used, within those different, security divisions, NSA, DARPA, etc. From what I've heard from those people that I've have good relations with. In your lifetime, which is not further than mine, do you think that we will ever have the truth, or at least be shown evidence of extraterrestrials that is completely undeniable? Or do you think we're going to continue going through this game even long past we're gone?
I think any first contact with extraterrestrials will be by radio telescope, with intelligence signals that move at the speed of light, and we'll find some signal that's clearly rising above the din of cosmic noise that would signal a change in the human condition, I think, that we cannot foresee necessarily or even imagine. But that would show that not only are we not alone, that there's an intelligence out there that is probably greater than our own. And what are you going to do about that, right? So I think that will precede any likelihood of aliens landing and walking out of their spaceship. But what will happen likely before that is we have an active search for life at all of any kind, okay? Any kind of exobiology, any kind of life thriving on an exoplanet. We have a very active cottage industry within modern astrophysics, in search of life, not only on the surface of Mars, but in the sub-ice oceans of Europa, one of the moons of Jupiter. This is melted ice that occurs because of tidal heating. The tidal forces rhythmically squeeze the moon in such a way that it's actually pumping energy into the moon, melting the ice. There's likely more water beneath the surface of Europa than all the oceans on Earth. And as far as we have been able to determine, life on Earth began in our oceans. So they're tantalizing places to look for life of any kind, even in our backyard, as well as the exoplanet catalog that we've been developing. It's now rising past 5,000 planets. So yes, I think in our lifetime, we will know whether or not there's life on Europa or on Mars in our lifetime.
Two things I'm going to ask you about the signals. I'm sure you heard this very old interview. It was clearly before Nikola Tesla died. You could even hear it on Wikipedia. And he believes he's receiving radio signals.
Wait. Interview with whom?
It's not an interview. It's a recording of Nikola Tesla. Yeah. Okay. And what he says,
it's recording before he died. Well, clearly it wouldn't be recording after he died unless you were
correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're
talking
like late 1800s, early 1900s, and he's basically talking about that he's receiving radio signals. And first, I believe he thinks they're Moon or Mars or one of the two. And he says something pretty astonishing that, I stopped to question and wonder, am I really the first human in modern times who is actually receiving radio messages from our Martian or moon neighbors? I'm sure you've heard that before. Have you?
No, actually I haven't. I'm intrigued by it.
I will get it to your management after. It's just really interesting to hear because this is 120 years ago. Now, the WOW signal.
What's your inquiry regarding his comment about his machines?
Oh no, I was going to go through a couple of these signals and then ask your opinion if we've ever had more. So the WOW signal, I believe it was 72, 74. It was one giant signal that came at Arecibo, and then it never repeated itself. And the scientific method. Yeah, exactly. Right. The scientific method dictates that we have to have, continuous. Otherwise, a one shot is not going to do anything. So we had the WOW.
You're correct, but I want to soften what you said. Science works best when you can repeat an observation that is extraordinary.
Yes,
if you cannot repeat an extraordinary observation, it will just remain an extraordinary observation, but you can't do much science with it. So that's all. Yes. That's my only point.
So since then, I haven't had a chance to speak to Seth Shostak in the last 6 months, but I've heard
of SETI.
I've heard there.
But I'm an educator, so I have to throw that out there. Yes.
Oh no problem. Yeah. But I've heard there have been a few signals that were not just one-offs that seem to be coming from star systems that we identified as dead, or from places that we haven't seen yet, and there's continues to come. Do you know about any of those, or is that just fodder to, that's not true?
No, I mean, so, oh, by the way, another problem with a singular signal
Hmm.
is that all manner of glitches occur all the time in electronic equipment,
Hmm.
all the time. And if you don't properly characterize how they occur, how often they occur, what they look like when they do occur, and if one of those happens and you didn't properly filter for it, you can think it's a real signal when in fact it's not. I cannot
Yes.
begin to tell you how much data processing has to happen to get rid of all of the artifacts of electronic equipment. You don't see that when you see the photo in the newspapers, but that is half of the data reduction that goes on when we obtain data from telescopes. So, yeah, I mean, they're intriguing signals, sure. But again, if you can't duplicate it, or if they don't keep sending it our way in the way they portrayed it in Contact, remember in the story
Yeah.
of the film, in the book Contact, there's a signal they're sending. I guess was it prime numbers. What was a little odd, by the way, is that
Yeah,
those
I know,
prime
right?
numbers were in base 10, and base 10 is an artifact of us having 10 fingers. They really should have sent pi in base 2, all right, but that would have been a little too obscure for the audience. Most people don't even know you can count in bases other than base 10. So you kind of need that. And if you don't have it, it goes in the catalog of curiosities.
Um, do you, because I know Elon Musk said he wanted to get back to the moon. I believe it was, if not 2022, that way we can get to the Mars in 2024. We're nowhere near yet there yet. Do you think it will happen in the next 20 years where we finally make it to the moon, to Mars, and eventually Europa, so we can finally drill and look for some of these answers?
You
I
said
mean, I'm
we.
talking about
Use the
in the
word
next
we.
20, 30 years. Yeah.
Use the word we. Are you referring to robots or humans?
Oh, no, I mean robots, but I'm talking about we as a human civilization. Do you think
I'm
we'll
saying
get there?
we have rovers on Mars, so we're already
Correct.
on Mars. So you really mean
Correct.
people on Mars, I think.
Yeah, actually, you know what? In this case, if Elon Musk sets up the 500 bouncing rock ships that he can, refuel in, and said it'll take about 6 months. Yes, I think just the rovers enough are not alone.
By the way,
When do you?
you said something very important there. If you get to refuel, I just want to re-emphasize it. If you get
Uh-huh.
to refuel en route, that means you can travel much faster,
Yes.
much
Yes.
faster to your destination. The way we now undergo space travel, you fire your rockets in the direction where you want to go, and then you coast the rest of the way there. Whereas if you continue to fire your rockets, you would continue to accelerate. Then you have
Hmm.
to turn the rockets around and decelerate, otherwise you'll overshoot your target. But if you do it
Yes.
that way, you need extra fuel supplies en route, filling stations, basically. So uh, I think we will be back to the moon very
Hmm.
shortly. What's motivating us, we're a little bit afraid of China. Just put that out
Yes.
there.
Yes.
That's the motivation. Not, oh, we're explorers, we're discoverers, and it's time. No, it's been 50 years since we've been back to the moon.
Yes.
No one has, quote, threatened our supremacy there until recent years. And then all of a sudden, we just say, it's time to go back to the moon. So there's a geopolitical force operating there. Are there geopolitical forces that will send people to Mars? I do not see them. Unless
And,
China
and
leaked a memo, doesn't even have to be true, just leak a memo that they want to put military bases on Mars. We'll be on Mars in 10 months.
And I'm really glad you brought up China, because we have the International Space Station, but China doesn't want to be a part of it. They've built their own.
No, you got that backwards. Okay?
Uh-huh.
You got it backwards. And I wrote a whole book on, not a whole book on this, but I wrote a whole book that contains this. And it's called Accessory to War: The Unspoken Alliance Between Astrophysics and the Military. It's a big fat
Mm.
book. If you're into history and science and war, it's all in there. And you'll see what role knowledge of the universe has played in national security all the way back since ancient times. So because it affects navigation, all right? No, we
Hmm.
don't build the bombs, but we can tell you the coordinate where you want the bomb to hit. All right. And that's been going on basically forever. So what happens? We create a space station. We collaborate with the Russians because now that they're no longer the Soviet Union, we want to get the scientists that we know have great insights into physics, nuclear power, weaponry, and rather have them go to our adversary. So we created this project, the space station, which then became the International Space Station, where the USA and Russia were major partners in it. How about China? By the way, China has come a very long way since then, but we prevented China from joining, citing their human rights record.
That goes to show how news are skewed all the time.
Yeah. So we prevented them. And as a result, China says, all right, if we're not invited into the sandbox, we'll build our own sandbox. And that's precisely what they did. They put their first astronaut into orbit. Their first astronaut would have been to the space station. But now their first astronaut is a hero, a taikonaut, as you would say in is it Mandarin? A taikonaut. Yeah. And then they said, we're going to build a space station. We're going to put a station on the modules on the moon. And every time they said they're going to do something, they've done it.
They do it.
They do it. That's why I think we're going back to the moon.
And thank you for clarifying that for me, because as you could see, media, other things I've read clearly made it look like it was the other way around.
I will add to that. I will add. And I'm not one bent on conspiracies, okay?
Yeah.
I'm the wrong guy for this show if that's where you want to head. But
no. Yeah.
Let me say that if you are deeply strategic in the government, you would say to yourself, the only reason why we went to the moon in the first place was because we had a competitor. And that lit a flame under our ass. And the competitive juices were flowing. And then we achieved mightily. If we prevent China from joining us, and they have this rapidly growing economy, we can pretty much guarantee they will create their own space program, and they will then become competitors. And if we have a competitor, we will then be more motivated to return to space as never before. And basically, that's exactly what's unfolding right now.
Well, good, because you know what? We need our astronauts back up there. We have a super chat question for you. This is from Lantonio. It reads, Dr. Tyson, what's your opinion on ancient aliens being on Earth, and specifically things like building of the Great Pyramid, for example? Also, Bob Lazar's claim that the crafts we from an archaeological dig. I think it's supposed to say we're from. And again, if you don't know it, obviously, don't respond to the parts that you don't know.
Okay, so I want you to recognize the landscape on which some of this kind of thinking unfolds. All right. We have the continent of Africa.
Yes.
It is 5 times larger than Europe, okay? Not including Greenland. It's 5 times because the Danes own Greenland, so technically that's landmass in Europe.
Yes.
But so it's 5 times larger. Some fraction of people, if you ask them where is Egypt, they will not tell you Africa, because it's never discussed in the same context as Africa, the continent.
Even though it's in northern Africa.
Okay, but you rarely see the word Africa together with the word Egypt. You just rarely do in the United States. So now what happens? You have Europeans, when they enter their colonistic phase, and they go into Africa, and they find the pyramids built by an African civilization. What happens over the centuries, and it's going on even to this day, and by the way, Stargate is one of my favorite sci-fi movies, but still, it is in denial of the fact that Africans built the greatest civilization of its day with the greatest architecture. The pyramid was the tallest thing in the world until, do you know when?
No, I mean, it surpassed the
Great Pyramid of Egypt, okay, was the tallest structure in the world stable structure. They attempted taller ones, but they collapsed. The tallest structure in the world until the Eiffel Tower.
Wow.
1876.
we're
Okay, so
talking-
this is a civilization in Africa. And here you have generally white people saying, this is so amazing and so long ago, aliens must have done it. They must have gotten help. It must have been directed by aliens. No, human beings did it. Africans did it. Okay? I mean, well, no, let me say, to say aliens did it is to deny the intellect of those who lived in Egypt, in Africa, 5,000 years ago, or whatever was the correct date that they were built. That is happening. So I just want you to recognize that, okay? Up front, it is an African civilization that people to this day are in denial of.
And it's not just the building of the pyramid. They were so advanced as far as architecture and planting, everything. They actually had,
agriculture, yes.
All of it was so advanced for that time.
And the calendars, very accurate calendars, and so. And by the way, the North Star was different back then, so the skies revolved around. So I just want to put that out there. Now let's get back to your original question about ancient aliens.
Yeah, this was from a chat, but yeah.
Oh, sure. I'm as intrigued as the next person about drawings of things that look anachronistic or odd. I'm intrigued by them just the way you are. And so we want to say that maybe people were drawing the visitation of aliens. Perhaps. I don't know. I don't know. It clearly made a very successful TV series for the History Channel that I think is still going strong.
It is.
But what it suffers from, and I'll use the word suffer very carefully here, what it suffers from is, I would call it the Eric Van Daniken effect.
Yes.
Okay? Eric Van Daniken wrote Chariots of the Gods.
And 30 other books.
It's in the spirit energy of the modern thinking regarding ancient aliens. So Eric Van Daniken would go back through history. He'd see something he couldn't explain or didn't understand it. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't understand it. And he presumed that ancient peoples would be incapable of figuring something like that out because he's using himself as the measure of what is possible to figure out. He's not allowing that maybe an ancient person, they wouldn't have your technology, but maybe they were cleverer than you, smarter than you, were able to figure stuff out better than you. You're not allowing that. If you allow that, you go back to these, wow, these folks were brilliant, or these folks were imaginative. If every novel that we wrote were illustrated, and then we have an apocalyptic Earth, and a million years from now, a new civilization discovers the drawings that we made, issued forth from our novels, might they have an ancient alien hypothesis as well? Or will they say, boy, those 20th century humans were pretty inventive and creative. Look at the monsters they imagined, the werewolves, the, Godzilla, so the human beings were not less imaginative back then. So it's easier for me to think that we just don't understand what was going on in the minds of the ancient peoples for what they drew, what they interpreted, and maybe it's just their imagination manifesting, and it's different from yours.
And all of the ancient civilizations, my family comes from Greece. I'm the firstborn here. And so all my life I've been shown different archaeological sites in Greece. And
with great pride, too. Right. There's a great legacy there, for sure.
Let me see what this is here real quick. Let me see if it's a question.
We're running short on time.
Right. We are. I was just going to get into your book, and then we'll start to close it out. Okay. Dark Hour, I missed your question. If you could re-put it in caps, I'll ask it real quick before we run out of time. Now, let me, until he comes on real quick, let me ask you about your book. Okay. So Starry Messenger, your new book, Examining Civilization as Seen Through the Prism of Science and the Scientific Earth. Tell us what's different about this book as opposed to all the previous ones you've written.
That's a very fair question. So I'm an educator. So my books generally are to teach people about space exploration, astrophysics, aspects of it, nuances, and there are different levels. I have books that are at very different levels. So I'm thinking about the total population that's out there. This latest book, with chapters, you read some of them at the beginning. There's a chapter on gender and identity, race and color, law and order, body and mind, meat eaters and vegetarians. All right. These are some hotbed subjects that you see people fighting about all the time.
Every day.
Every day. Especially Thanksgiving dinner. So what I did was I took a scientific perspective on these arguments, and especially a cosmic perspective on these arguments that people are having. And throughout, I revealed to you that if this is your argument and you're posing it that way, you're missing this other point. There's another vista that you can ascend to, look back on your argument and realize maybe there was not much of an argument there to begin with. Or maybe I wasn't as, I was unjustified with the strength with which I expressed my opinions. I'll just give a good example. I did my favorite example from the book. If let's say you're a vegetarian because you don't want to kill animals, perfectly respectable posture. Okay, you might even have a humane mousetrap in your basement because you don't want to snap the neck of the mouse, of the hapless mouse. So there it is. You go down, you collect it, and you release it back to the wild, and you feel good about it. What you've done is guarantee that mouse will get swallowed whole by an owl or hacked into pieces by all manner of woodland predators. The average life expectancy of a mouse in the wild is between 9 and 18 months. So if you really care about the life of the mouse, what you should do is just let them roam free in your basement because then they will live up to 6 years. So the decision which you feel righteous about is actually not in the best interest of the mouse. That is a simple example where, and by the way, no, that's not astrophysics, but what I do when I figure out the universe is just that kind of thinking. I say, this may be true, but is there any other piece of this puzzle that I'm not thinking about that I need to enter so that maybe the strength with which I'm holding this view is unjustified? The whole book is filled with those kind of examples.
Yeah, one of the other ones, chapters you wrote is about conflict and resolution. With regards to that, did you obviously discuss things like mediation or anything like that? So
no, mediation implies let's meet in the middle.
Yeah.
This book is not about meeting in the middle. This book is about meeting in a new place that you didn't even know was there. So conflict and so what is a new place? I'll give you an example. Liberals like lobbing accusations against conservatives saying that they're anti-science. Okay. Now, if you deny human-caused climate change, yes, that's anti-science, or that's not understanding how science works, but it's not in the interest of the survival of civilization. It actually has existential consequences. Yes, that is not embracing science. But let's look back at the liberals. There's an entire spectrum of belief systems that land squarely in the liberal portfolio, such as homeopathy, feather energy, chakra realignments. There's a whole category. Even astrology is much more common from the data I've seen, among liberals than among conservatives. It could be because you have more religious people who are conservative, and religions generally reject astrology. So what you have here is all these ways of thinking embedded in liberal thought, in liberal portfolios that require the rejection of some or all mainstream science that relates to it. So the liberal can say the conservative is rejecting science, but they do not have the high road on that. And they cannot claim that they embrace science as a voting community because they do not in those examples that I gave. And it's widespread. So and the conservatives like saying that they're the family values party when the only two presidents to have ever divorced were Republican presidents. That's a little odd. The states that have the highest out of wedlock divorce birth rates, out of wedlock, teenage pregnancy, out of wedlock births are 8. I forgot that it's in the book correctly. It's 7 or 8 out of the 10 states with the highest out of wedlock birth rates are red states. All right. So you have politicians just talking, saying what they want you to believe without any correspondence with an actual analysis. What you do as a scientist is you see a claim made, is like, I'm going to verify that claim. I'm going to find out. I'm going to ask the question in a new way. Let's see. Oh, what are the states? How do they vote? Oh, another thing about, are you anti-science? The budget for science in this country post Second World War has been higher under Republican presidents than under Democratic presidents.
Yes.
So no matter what your rhetoric is, you can deny science all you want, but if you vote to increase the science budget, you're pro-science.
Yes.
Period. So I'm applying sensible scientific analysis to people's conflicts. And when you do that, it's not mediation. No, it's both of you are wrong. Here's the way to think about that problem. Then the argument evaporates, and then you go have a beer at the pub. That doesn't happen today.
True. There have been a few other questions. The one of them that I
let's
couldn't
do
see
fast. I'll milk out 5 more minutes. Let's do it.
Oh, are you sure? I was just gonna say, if you want, we could wrap up and then just agree to come on next time, and we'll get those questions. Would you rather do that?
We'll do a couple now. I'll answer quickly.
Okay.
I'll go to soundbite mode.
Let me pull this one here. Give me 1 second to pull it up because I got to the bottom. So let me get you the last 2, and then, of course, hang by for a quick
by the way,
minute
everything
after.
I said flows out of the title of the book, Starry Messenger, which echoes Galileo discovering things in the universe that changed how we interacted with each other on Earth.
Okay.
And the subtitle is Cosmic Perspectives on Civilization. And that's why it goes all those places.
I'm going to put a link to the book in the description for everyone who wants to buy it. This is Lantonio. I don't know if you recall the first question. This is what it says. Follow-up. It's not that I don't believe it's possible. I just wonder how the materials were cut and moved from so far away with how many stones weighed, for example, and the time it took to do so. I'm assuming.
Are we talking about Stonehenge?
The pyramid.
Oh, the pyramids. Oh, you know, if a construction project takes 10 years, you say, oh my gosh, this cost overruns and it's slow. Let's hire another company next time. We're not going to do this. Put your time in context. 5,000 years ago, it wasn't about building something in 10 years. Yeah. If you have enough people, enough labor, oh my God, and you have enough time, so it took 100 years. Cathedrals take 100 years to complete. I'm not. Just think about if you run the math on it. I'll give an example, which is maybe easier to think of. Humans coming out of Africa populated the entire world, and they walked. They didn't fly. They didn't have horses. They didn't have any domesticated animals. They walked up into Europe, into Asia, crossed the land bridge, into North America, South America. We're all over the world. You say, man, that takes a long. Oh my gosh. Well, if you take the circumference of the Earth, 25,000 miles, and say, I'm going to walk 2 miles an hour. That's not fast. It's not slow. It's all right. Yes. You know how long it would take to walk 2 miles an hour, 25,000 miles? You know how long it would take?
Oh,
it takes 4 years.
Years. I was just going to say,
no. Yes, but not 100 years. It would take
4
years. Now, obviously, there's not a road that goes around and you have to eat and there's mountains and oceans. My point is to be so amazed that you go from Africa across the land bridge into South America. You say, oh, my gosh, that was amazing. You could walk the circumference of the Earth in 4 years.
Yeah.
So multiple generations of migrating humans can easily populate the entire world in very reasonable amounts of time. So now you want to build pyramids? Oh, by the way, there's some failed pyramid experiments in another place. If you're saying the aliens did it, what were they? Were they experimenting here on Earth too? Their pyramids where the slopes were too steep and the stones fell off. Okay, we got to make it a little squatter. You can see the evidence of the failed experiments. So yeah, it takes a long time. And by the way, Stonehenge is even more impressive. Yes, because those rocks were not from nearby. At least the pyramids, they made their own bricks. Okay, the Stonehenge, the blue stone from, as far as we know, dozens of miles away. And so, but they did have,
age,
they could
too.
roll them on logs. There are ways to move it if you have plenty of time and you care enough about what you're doing. So I try to be less impressed by it.
Yeah, and the age
or
of
be
Stone
impressed
Age,
and say, yes, an African civilization did this. And by the way, they're cleverer than I am.
and the age of Stone Age is like is a much older than the pyramids. That's why to me it's an amazing feat. This is the question I couldn't find, and this will be the last from them. And I'm just going to ask you to wrap up and talk about your book, and then hang by after. This is from Dark Hour Paranormal. He reads. Can physicality truly be defined as a spectrum of observable frequencies? Or is this the collective vibration theory more of a misconstruence? Tried to super chat, wouldn't let me fit this. Anyway, everything up until misconstruence is the question.
I'm not sure I understand the question. String theory says that all particles in the universe are vibrational energy, sort of these pseudo one-dimensional vibration strings. You can have that conversation with Michio Kaku.
Yes.
If string theory bears out, then yes, all of matter and energy, matter and energy are the same thing, are nothing but the symphony of vibrating strings, manifesting as protons, as quarks, as neutrinos, and this sort of thing. And that's a remarkable and beautiful possibility. But string theory is still out there.
Yes.
And it's elegant and beautiful, but that is not necessarily the prerequisite for what is true in the world.
Last thing, thank you so much. Like I said, hang by for a quick moment after. Story messages. The subtitle is You Examine Civilization as Seen Through the Prism of Science and the Scientific Mind. Where can people find that book? And I will put a link in the description for you.
Oh, thanks. No, it's just Amazon. Anybody, it's anywhere. And I actually did the audio book of it. So it's not a long book. It's 200 pages of text, a lot of pages of notes at the end, but it's only 200 pages of text. It's not even a large book. It's like the format out of it is relative. So I didn't, I know a lot of people don't have time to read, and so I was trying to be respectful of that. But I did the audiobook if you get stuck
that's
in
a big thing. I actually have an account to audible.com, so I'm going to put both links at the bottom.
Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Tyson, like I said, hang by for a quick second. Thank you so very much. This has been years in the making. And what better time than this calendar year where I'm celebrating, well, now 10 months.
Happy 10th anniversary.
Thank you, sir. And with everybody out there, we'll catch you on the flip side. I may have open lines later on this evening. Just a couple of thanks for the super chats. We have Dark Hour Paranormal. We have Rockstar. We have Lou Sheehan twice. RGM. And please forgive me for those last couple I can't read, but every single one of you I will also list in the super chat. With that being said, this is Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson with Dr. J, and we are signing out.